Thank you so much, Ndimanaye, and thank you everyone that is here. My name is Lindo Uhlezwane. I am the founder of Aphrodite Global, which is a non-profit organization that is aimed at alleviating gender-based violence through engagement in rural-based communities. So the dialogue that we have today, that we're starting with right now, is how to combat social gender-based violence. So there has been many master classes and dialogues that have been taking place throughout the day, and we've had a lot of amazing speakers, including Innocent Kazamula and so many others from across our beautiful continent of Africa. And I would just like, before we start with this session, to reiterate some of the important aspects that have been covered and just about how they link to sexual gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa. As we would all know, that most of the gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa are caused due to financial dependence in South Africa from men and women and non-binary genders and so forth. It is very important that we should engage ourselves in conversations that matter, conversations that have to do with data is the new oil, conversations that have to do with alleviating and flattening the curve of unemployment in our dear continent. So I do stand to be corrected. The speakers for this dialogue are Samora Mbambi. Samora, are you in?
Yes, I'm in.
Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing from you. Nzalama Matebula, are you here? Nzalama? Okay, I think, all right, no problem. Is Charlotte Masiti here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, thank you so much. I am also looking forward to engaging with you. And I know that the host for the conversation today, Ndi Imanaye, has introduced me as the chair of the conversation or of this platform, but I would really like for us to have a more reflective and interactive session as much as possible. I have prepared some pointers that I will not be able to share on screen immediately because I am using my phone and I've had quite a hectic day that was unplanned. But I think we should be able to have a fruitful conversation. So I'm just going to lay out some of the statistics in South Africa right now, and maybe we could start our conversation just by deliberating some of that and what we think are the major causes for that. Right now in South Africa, in 1 hour, which is 60 minutes, 3 women die at the hands of a man, which basically means now that right now, as we are in this platform talking about sexual gender-based violence and femicide, there is a woman out there somewhere, 3 of them actually, that are fighting for their lives at the hands of a man. And South Africa has actually been named by Interpol the rape capital of the world. And I think that is where the sexual part of GBVF is covered in this. So you would then know that if we are the rape capital of the world, that our statistics for gender-based are even higher than countries that are actually at war, such as Sudan and South Sudan. And that should be something that actually raises an alarm in us to say we are actually in a cold war. In every 25 seconds in this country, somebody is getting raped. 25 seconds, someone is getting raped. More than 45% of the people that are getting raped are minors. So these are very alarming rates, and most of these rates are being caused, of course, by situations like unreliable reporting systems. We all know, because all of the speakers that are in this platform are from South Africa, we do know that South Africa has got a problem with reporting systems through the SAPS department, we do know that there are a lot of stigmas and stereotypes that do not allow people to freely talk about their experiences of gender-based violence, and therefore do not report. There is a lot of patriarchy, there is a lot of superiority and inequality between men and women. So to the speakers and to everyone that is here in this platform with us, what do these statistics say to you, and what do you think we can do to flatten the curve of sexual to everyone? Thank you. Charlotte, are you speaking?
Yeah, I am. Thank you for that introduction, Linda Kuche. The statistics are really shocking because when you look at the crime statistics in in Southern Africa, South Africa is one of like you mentioned is one of the unsafest countries for women and children, and that really says a lot about our institutions, like our government, our policy making, and it's really frustrating to be a woman in this country. And we also have different contributors to this kind of social gender-based violence. For example, we could point that out to unemployment rates, how unemployment rates are actually exacerbating these issues of sexual gender-based or social gender-based violence against children and women. Maybe men are selling kind of engaging in these activities for so in terms of selling young people or young girls to these sexual activities so that they can have money through them, so that they can sustain their lives. As well as we can also look at issues like mental health. We also have cases of schizophrenia, depression, borderline personality disorder, psychopathy, and sociopathy. These are also some of the mental health issues that might be affecting these people. And we just have people in rural communities. We really don't know, because we are not getting the statistics of these people in this deep rural communities, why they are committing this social gender-based violence crimes. For example, raping a young girl as an uncle or a brother in the house, or a cousin, and then you just find a young girl or your cousin and then you just rape her. It doesn't make sense. And because these things are not gauged in systematically, we are not really aware why these things are happening. So kind of there's also uncertainties in terms of how this problems are happening. And it's just kind of it is really frustrating to be a woman. It's we always need to be wearing an extra armor on our shoulders to always looking on the back of our shoulders, trying to protect ourselves. But we can't really protect ourselves in a very community or society where men are not really doing their efforts to, or perpetrators of SGBV are not doing their efforts in terms of not committing this suicide, I mean these crimes. For example, Malima mentioned said something, I think it was a day or two ago, about women. We don't need to protect women if these men can actually stop hurting women. So it's kind of when we look at the social gender-based violence, we're looking at it into different lenses, from the perspective of men sexually abusing women, or violently or physically or emotionally or psychologically abusing women, and how that plays out, and the narratives around those, as well as people or queer people, how all these things interplay together, or how they're interconnected. So it's quite really a challenge to be a woman or a girl child or a queer person or a man who is actually under the statistics of the few of those men who are actually abused by the other gender.
I hear you. I hear you so much, Charlotte, and I have noted down some of the major issues that you brought forward, such as the link of mental health to gender-based violence, just about how frustrating it is to be a woman in South Africa, and also just talking about awareness about gender-based violence and social violence and all of those types of dynamics in rural-based communities. And just as well as many popular narratives and stereotypes that are out there, such as men killing women just to sustain their wealth, cultural rituals, traditional stuff, and all of that. And I feel that these are very important aspects that we should dive into whilst we are within this dialogue. But before we actually talk about that, do we have another speaker on the floor that would like to elaborate on what has been said so far?
Okay, I think I'll in here. But before I can even go through, may I please get some confirmation that I'm audible?
Yes, you are audible, Sibulele.
Thank you very much. Right. So, okay, this is me personally. I always believe that in as much as we are good at identifying a problem, in this context being sexual, gender-based violence, but it's just not enough. We need to go further. And when we go further, I don't mean that we have to come up with a solution after we have identified a problem. I believe that immediately after we identified the problem, we need to then also make an extension on that identification. We need to go and identify the cause of the problem. And then if we go to the cause of the problem, or rather causes of the problem, we deal with the causes of the problem, because the causes are actually the root of the problem. So if we tackle the problem at its root, we will be automatically also tackling the problem in its entirety. And that's just like my belief ideology on how to move on with things. So of course then already you and Charlotte have already spoken about the problemizing the gender-based violence, which is okay. But I'm just going to be dwelling much on the causes of the problem, and then from the causes of the problem, I'm going to be trying to move to the proposed solutions and also the practical implementation of those solutions. So with the causes of the problem, there are primarily two. The first one being the gender norms, where of course then we're going to be they also speak about gender stereotypes, and they are perpetuated by culture, religion, societal norms, and unequal power relations, all of these things. Secondly, the other one is hunger, and when we speak of hunger, we speak of it in that instance of food security. And if someone then, of course, depends on you in terms of food and finances, you somehow are going to have that sense of feeling of having that dependency on that person, or rather the person who is like somehow assisting you in terms of hunger. They're going to have that sense of ownership or entitlement over you. And hence, they will always just try to justify abuse because they think that they own you, right? So these are the primarily two causes. And perhaps maybe it's about time we start to touch the uncomfortable truth, to say, look, we understand that in society, we've got gender-based violence and what's not. But what really causes this problem? And in most of the instances, whenever people are talking about the causes of gender-based violence and sexual-based violence, that is, they all regard the cultural perspective, right? And we need to understand, Lindo, that the societal power dynamics and societal norms and all of those things, they are further primarily perpetuated by these two within society. And I think I cannot just go further now in terms of explaining them. I think that is something which I'll be bringing forward when we are speaking on the dialogue. But I do want to talk about how culture plays a primarily role in terms of one of the causes of gender-based violence and sexual-based violence, and also the religion in and of itself. And of course, particularly then I will be talking about culture in terms of the African societies, and also further, if time permits, make an extension on also the patriarchy that which also exists and also further perpetuated by culture and religion in and of themselves, particularly in the African societies, but most in particular in the South African context. But then, of course, then just to quickly come to answer the question posed on how do we combat the SGBV, Lindo, we've got proposed solutions, right? But I believe that proposed solutions are based on the theoretical context. And it's about time that as society, we move away from that theory and we start to apply the proposed solutions practically, right? And Minage, I'm a person who believes in a very much affirmation action, and affirmation action that is fueled with violence. I mean, not violence, rather, but radicalism, sorry. So the proposed solutions which we have that are in theory solutions such as awareness campaigns, whereby people believe that if we go to awareness campaigns, therefore we'll be able to be spreading education against gender-based violence and sexual-based violence. Some believe in rehabilitation, that if we rehabilitate people, we are trying to change their mindset. You know, some are saying that we should go and restructure the education system in both in basic education and higher learning, because that will also play a primitive role in terms of changing people's perception and how they act towards gender-based violence. Some believes that we should be drafting bills and legal policies. For example, in South Africa, the hate crime bills, which was proposed back in when I was still in high school, back in 2015, but still, again, it's not yet implemented even now. So all of these policies and proposals are there as part of solutions. However, we say that for how long are we going to wait on more solutions being proposed, and yet they do not materialize themselves and finding themselves practically within society to try to combat the SGBV. So all of these are very good and well theoretically, but they aren't as enough in terms of the practicality, particularly when you speak of implementation. So what am I then proposing as a direct response to the question of how to combat sexual gender-based violence? I personally believe in radicalism, Lindo. When something has been going, because we've got two types of changes in society. We've got an organic change and we've got the radical change. The organic change is the one that requires the change to occur organically. So nobody has to force it. Nobody has to try to assist in terms of changing. We believe that usually it's going to change itself. But seemingly, the sexual and gender-based violence in South Africa, organic change is not occurring. Therefore, we need to come with radicalism. And the specific reason why I'm speaking of radicalism is because if I may just make a very good proper example, as I learned, Lindo, for the dialogue, is that even if you look at our country, how we got our country, how we got freedom in South Africa in particular, it was not because of the organic change, the private discussions that took place in all those conferences and in all those sittings. No, blood had to be taken out, blood and sweat, people had to fight. There needs to be a very good stand still within the country so that the government can, with immediate effect, take people's concerns very much seriously and to say, look, man, this really is a pain in society. How about we try to twitch things here and there, right? And because radicalism always works, even in South Africa, when schools, school children are being excluded, we see in most institutions of higher learning, from Wits, from UJ, from Walter Sisulu, they always protest, and people always get what they want when they protest. And I'm not advocating for a protest, rather, but I'm saying that if means justifies the end, then so there's a law and order. I mean, the statistics which you've provided are very much extreme, and I think South Africa has become a very much patient country. When you say that in every 25 minutes there's like two women that are being raped, two women that are being subjected to gender-based violence. There are queer people that are being molested in society, and we are very mum about such, whilst we are even deemed as the capital of the rape in the whole entire globe. So something really must be done. And if it means radicalism is then the tool for us to achieve what we want to achieve, then so be it, because means justifies the end. And that's my stance. And of course, then I will be engaging further when we go through the dialogue I'm hoping that we are going to be coming with practical solutions, because all these theoretical proposed solutions, for me, they are just not enough. It's high time we start to implement practicality to try to combat the sexual and gender-based violence. Thanks, Lindo.
Thank you so much, Sibulele. That was a mouthful indeed, and I know for a fact that Black radical feminism is in the house. Black radical feminism has made an entrance in the building, and I love this so much for us. You have laid down so many points that speak about practicality versus the theoretical framework that we have as a country, and I have to agree with you. I am obliged to agree with you that we have so many policies, laws, legislature, and paperwork that are proposed as solutions to sexual gender-based violence and all the other social issues that women and queer people actually do face. But in reality of it all, it does seem that as a country, we are quite mum about the reality of what is happening on the ground. And because of that, it just feels as though we have so many bills, we've got so much legislature that does not get to be implemented at the end. And I feel that that is the root cause of the problem in the end. So just to recap on both points by Sibulele and Charlotte, I would just like to reiterate and emphasize that over 2 billion rands are spent. Sorry, we're busy. Over 2 billion rands are actually spent per year in South Africa in attempts to combat gender-based violence. You can just imagine how much that money is, and still we are in the problem, and it does not decrease, it does not flatten, it gets worse by the day. And I think that also speaks to our leadership as a country, because as Sibulele was saying, that we are quite mum about this, and I feel that the people that are at the top, the people that have the real voices that should be listened to, are the ones that are mum about it, because to an extent it is actually beneficial to them. So just to have a dialogue on some of the points that have actually been brought to the floor right now. We talk about gender-based violence and its relation to mental health. And like I said, I want this to be as reflectory as possible. Just reflecting on my own experiences of gender-based violence. Those that know me and know where my activism is actually stemmed from. I was a victim of rape at an institution of higher learning. It was actually a gang rape, and there wasn't any channels for me to report. There wasn't anywhere for me to go and actually say, oh, this has happened to me. And so because this has happened to me, where am I supposed to go? Like everything just became so dark. And I was named the university in-house poet for the university that I was in at the time. I just feel like, let me not mention the university right now, because that on its own has also caused me some problems, or like back in the past. But just in a reflectory mode, I am just saying that so many people in South Africa, so many women, so many queer people in South Africa find themselves in a situation where they have been sexually harassed, they have been raped, they have been a victim of gender-based violence, and they do not know where to go. And yet there is so much legislature, so many policies, and so many other things, and you just find yourself in the dark. And let's remember that all of the statistics that we said right now are statistics of cases that have actually been reported. So just to reiterate what Sibulele was saying, the practicality part of it, if there's the reporting, there's a problem with the reporting system in South Africa, you can just imagine what the real numbers are, like how many other people out there could not get the chance to report, and how many people do not even have the access to those same policies. And when you then find yourself in a corner of being alone, when there are actually so many victims out there, which then brings us to the conversation of mental health. Here you are, a victim of rape, a victim of gender-based violence, a victim of domestic violence, or whatever parts of violence, and you feel alone, and the world starts crashing down on you. Mental health, mental wellness, mental illness, you find yourself you've got anxiety, you've got depression, and you've got all of these byproducts of sexual gender-based violence. Then what do we do to make our communities and our societies a safer place to engage about mental illness, to engage about mental health? What type of platforms should we be able to open to say to people, look, you are not alone, and although this is not fine, this is what you can do, this is what mental illness is. Let's talk about that. How do you think mental illness is a direct link to sexual gender-based violence, and how can we combat that and make the situation better for victims or survivors of sexual gender-based violence? The platform is open to the crowd to engage. Thank you.
Sorry, Lindo, please just repeat the question. How do we make sexual what directed? Please, I didn't get that question.
Okay, I do admit that I had a blunder here and there because I was speaking so much. But what I am asking is that we now know that there is a link between sexual gender-based violence and mental health, and that there is a huge gap between the knowledge and the awareness and so forth, on mental health and illness in societies. So how do we then create platforms, or how do we create spaces that are mental health friendly or mental illness friendly, so that survivors and victims of gender-based violence can feel free to speak about or even be healed from mental illness? How do we ensure that mental illness is a conversation to engage about with its relation in link to sexual gender-based violence?
Thank you very much, Lindo. I'm not sure if I can just quickly go through. Yes, but I think I'm just gonna chip in. Right. So, okay, just to answer your question, Lindo, on how can we make mental health a discussion in terms of trying to eradicate or maybe combat sexual gender-based violence. First thing first, I think the sexual or the gender-based violence, that one which is perpetuated towards the victim, is the one that which will determine whether the perpetrator really suffers on mental health or not, because what I'm trying to shy away here, and I'm going to be very much radical, but in a very smooth way. What I'm trying to shy away from here, Lindo, is that we bring excuses as reasons, right? Because I believe that there's a difference between an excuse and a reason. Yes, it can then be a reason for someone who has got mental health. I mean, it can be a reason because maybe that could have been prompted by their upbringing. When they were growing up, they could have been subjected to either physical or emotional or psychological or even sexual abuse, and to an extent that was never evaluated when they were still young. They never spoke about it for whatever reasons that which they might have had. Some could have been denied access to services where they could have been able to speak about it. Some were just intimidated, but they could have just not spoken about it to an extent that now they embraced it, and it sort of like comes in naturally for them to even abuse other people without even intending to abuse them intentionally, right? So in such instances, then mental health can be a reason. And we're not saying that it's justified, but we're saying that it can be a reason for us to say, look, we need to start to sit down and have some reflection on how does mental health play a primary role in gender-based violence? And I'm saying that only if we can be able to answer that question, we can only do so by determining the type of the gender-based violence abuse that has been perpetuated to the victim, right? Because we've got people who are completely okay in terms of their mental health, but it's just about power dynamics. They just want to show, now I'm owning you. I feed you, I clothe you, I give you this and that, therefore you need to be loyal to me. The minute you're not loyal to me, they start to scope and donor or maybe abuse you in any form of way, because they've got that mentality. And it's not even an issue of mental health on that one. It's just an issue of them having this power relation dynamics. And that's why I'm saying that to those instances, it can't then really be in mental health to those ones. It's just an excuse. So then just to answer then the question on how can we make mental health fit in, Lindo, I think policy-wise, firstly, let me just bring it back to practical deployment. I think it's high time as the country, at least, when we perhaps deploy people into governance, we deploy people who understand the issues that are happening on the ground, and people who are activists before they are politicians. I'm not sure if you're getting me, Lindo, because we've got so many Yes, we've got so many politicians that are sitting in the chambers, sitting in the House of Order, the Parliament, and the legislatures. They discuss these policies very well, very, very well, Lindo, very well. But then they fail to even like meet 2/3 majority to vote on passing that policy. What is the problem?
Yes.
The problem is that it's because they don't relate, right? They don't understand what's happening in the ground because when they are at the comfort of their own positions, they've got securities and what's not, which the people in rural Gqeberha in Eastern Cape don't have, in Qingqolo they don't have, and they are suffering, right? And that's when now, when I'm saying when we deploy, it's high time we start to deploy people who are activists before they are politicians. What then
Just
does
to
this
interject there, Sibulele, before I forget, because you are raising such an important point that also speaks to victim blaming, the lack of relation, the lack of relatability from the people in parliament and legislature, because they do not understand so much what is happening on the ground. Then that is where you find that when a person reports, there is so much victim blaming. What were you doing at this time of the street? At the time of the night in the streets, what were you wearing, and so forth? Because then to the people that create these policies and legislature, they are based on theory, and theory will be so limited, you understand, not to how people behave, but certainly to what could have been the cause. And it also brings me to then what you said in the beginning of your introductory, that we need to go back to the root cause of what really causes sexual gender-based violence. And this also brings me back to a point that Charlotte had said, that a CIC of the economic freedom fighters had said that if men would just behave the way that they should, in a human manner or in a moral manner, then we shouldn't even be talking about protecting women. So it takes us back to the root cause of sexual gender-based violence. And as you had said, Sibulele, in the beginning, that it is time to talk about the uncomfortable truths. And in my activism, when talking about the uncomfortable truths, I always say that we like to shy away so much from what really is the cause of gender-based violence. And the real cause of gender-based violence is men as the perpetrators, but we try to shy away from that, just to have like some human balance and in equality between the genders. But at the end of the day, we know who the perpetrators are. We know what the root causes are, taking back to patriarchy and financial dependence and so forth. And because we've got such an unstable country, we do find a lot of women that are dependent on men, and at the end of the day, the power dynamics are playing out. So I'm sorry just for that interjection. I was just reflecting before I forget what was on my mind. So you may continue. And Charlotte, I would like for you to jump in the conversation as well. Tell us where you're at mentally right now, what you're thinking about what we're talking about right now. What do you think? Where are you? Let us not get lost in the conversation. Sibulele, the floor is back to you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lindo. Just to proceed, the mental health, you see, on that 2 billion, which we invest so much as a country on trying to combat gender-based violence, but instead of combating it, it keeps on increasing. And no one cares. And women and those who are victims of gender-based violence are subjected to secondary victimization when they go to police facilities to report these cases. I think these 2 billion should be, number one, redirected to creating safe houses for the victims, right? So the safe houses, of course, is something which is going to be very controversial. But like I said, I am here to take a hard line to say that means justifies the end, right? If we can be able to have jails for perpetrators, right, as a form of rehabilitation, as the law would say, but why are we then disregarding the victims, right? Because clearly, when the victims go to the police centrals, the police are going to try to disregard the matter. They're going to ask questions such as, what were you wearing? What did you do to prompt him? And all these questions that are further victimizing the victim. So that 2 billion must be redirected into creating safe houses that are going to have proper and accredited, well-trained gender specialists and people who know how to deal and tackle this issue of gender-based violence. Of course, then, when we speak about such policies, we also need to talk about the relations, because we've just discovered, even you have concurred with me, the lack of relatability. To say that people do not relate and such, they are just going to do this thing just to shy it under the carpet. And you cannot do such when it comes to issues of sexual and gender-based violence, because these are matters between life and death. The government needs to treat it with primarily effective, and also perhaps maybe even I myself as a law scholar, it's high time we start to infiltrate the legal chambers which we sit in, the legal chambers which we so much advocate law and everything, to say that how about we recreate a clause in a section, even if we need to amend a certain particular place in the constitution, to say that really when it comes to sexual and gender-based violence, the law must not take a smile in the face. Because, Lindo, I'm coming from a family where my sister was victimized somehow, and then when the next day she saw the perpetrator, even though the perpetrator was arrested on the Friday, then on the following Monday the perpetrator was out on a bail of 200. So that shows a middle finger to the victims. That shows that we are spitting salivas in the face of the victims. We need to create these safe houses where this mental health will be evaluated, and perhaps maybe even the perpetrators must be dealt with harshly. So, right, the harshly so is what I'm willing to have us to discuss, because it can be subjective. But Mina, I believe in radical, practical implementation of the harshly so, right? Because we need to send a message out there to say that this is how we are dealing with this issue, but also we need to send a message of deterrence to deter the upcoming generation from practicing the same culture, which is a problem in society. The same way how the government stopped people who used to be forced into marriages, Ugutwala back in the days. It's the same way how the government can still stop this one. But because the government does not relate on this issue, they're going to be mum. Hence, I'm saying that we need to go back on how we deploy in governance. We need to deploy activists, people who relate to these issues on the ground. People who are not going to be politicians, but rather people who are going to be activists advocating for social justice. And the laws and policies they come up with are what are going to be addressing exactly what needs to be addressed in society. And that's how justice is going to be served. Thanks, Lindo.
Thank you so much, Sebulele. Charlotte and everyone in the platform, we are talking about law, legislature, redirecting of the 2 billion funds. We are talking mental health. We are talking about relatability and the real situation on the ground as far as sexual gender-based violence is concerned. Charlotte, what are your thoughts? Where are you right now? What are you thinking? What is this conversation sparking from you? And I'd just like to hear from everyone else here. I can see that we've got Kazamula, we've got Abigail, we have Balelwe, we've got Ndi, we've got Zek. What are your thoughts on the matter? I would like for us all to just talk right now, to just engage right now, come about with practical solutions on what we can really do as the real activists, as the real people who are facing the problem of sexual gender-based violence. Charlotte, where are you? Let's hear from you.
Thank you so much. Similarly, you really said a lot of, important things that I really related to, especially on the implementations of solutions and, centering people into, all those solutions, as well as how, the law is affecting all of this. As a climate activist or climate justice activist and a mental psychology student, when you spoke about radical activism earlier on, I realized it just reminded me of how as activists, we really doing our best to stand, on the streets and doing that radical activism. And when we're speaking about this whole mental health and social gender-based violence, it's I was reading last year a paper on depression, actually, where they mentioned that our government spends the Department of Health spends 4% of its 9.3 billion on mental health services, and it kind of like it begs the question of where is the rest of the 96% going to. And like when we were speaking about like how the victim blaming of these people, or I mean victims being blamed by both offenders, communities, as well as police officials, and maybe health providers, like nurses and doctors in hospitals. It really sent like a really strong message to me as like one of like sexual social gender-based violence survivors. It's kind of like also like kind of like maybe speaking like when we're talking about how implementation of all the solutions, because like if we look back from let's say for example today is the 16th of June, 46 years after 1976, and it's like there have been like policies being passed on, and when you look into all those policies, none of those policies have actually had an actual positive impact on protecting the victims of crimes, especially social gender-based violence. For example, when you look into domestic violence act, and when you look into the NCPS, National Crime Strategy Protection, or something like that, you kind of like what are these people spending a lot of money on making these policies? Why are they agreeing on these issues? And then it goes back to these people do not understand the relation, they don't relate to the issues. And even the people that relate to the issues now, because they are comfortable in in every position where they are, they do not care anymore. It's like just kind of like, okay, I'm now out of the gutters, so fuck where those people are. I mean, sorry for the language, but yeah, it's kind of like that's how they say it. And as well as like for us as young people, as well as victims or survivors of SGBV, what we can do is like invoke the Constitution. We have the power to hold the government accountable. We can bring back the momentum of radical activism, like Sibulele was saying that radical activism has actually had more impact than organic change or revolution. So it's kind of like mobilizing the mass. It's not just about gender-based violence. It's not just about mental health. It's about a whole lot of issues, because now there are policies like being passed, like for example the climate change bill that was drafted early in February this year. It's like it has a lot of holes. They have like a lot of loopholes. And how are we as young people in setting ourselves in such important decisions that actually affect our futures and our realities? Because the people who are making decisions for us are not actually close to being the victims or survivors of climate disasters and SGB, mental health vulnerability. It's like young people, I as activists who know the struggle, who have fought the struggles on facing the challenges, like bringing ourselves into these rooms, like in setting, like kind of like when there's a table, it's set, there are chairs, and you don't have a seat in that table, so you bring your own chair and you insert yourself there. It's important you do that. That's really radical activism. We are doing that in the climate movement, so in the climate justice movement. So I think we can do that kind of radical activism in every other aspect that we are actually saying that we don't want our government of our patriarchal government to be making decisions on us as women, on us as children, on us as young people. people as well as on about us for us as the survivors of domestic SGBV survivors. So what I also do on my work is in climate activism, but what I do is my work revolves around the intersections between climate change or environmental problems and socio-economic problems. So I make sure that I also have climate cafes where we just kind of open that space where people talk about the different their feelings about everything. Could be social gender-based violence, could be mental illnesses, mental problems, but not as a practitioner, but as a peer-to-peer group, because these are not the services that we are lacking when we go to hospitals, clinics. For example, if you go to a bigger hospital, Mankweng, you might find that maybe there's a queue of about 50 people waiting on one psychologist. Oh, there's not even a psychologist there, or there's no psychiatrist there. So it's also a problem of how people in power are actually treating us as community members, community citizens, children, and as young people. Like, for example, you go to the police, you report about rape.
Sorry about that, Charlotte. We got into the session 7 minutes late. So basically, right now it's 2 minutes past 6, and I would like for us to be time conscious. You will continue just shortly with to conclude your conversation. But before we do that, I would like to hear from everyone else with the last 5 minutes that we have left. Right after Charlotte concludes her conversation, may I please hear from you, Abigail? May I hear from you, Kazamula? May I hear from you, Zek? We are talking about gender-based violence. We're talking about legislature. We are talking about mental health. We're talking about the reality on the ground. We are talking about practical proposed solutions to alleviate or flatten the problem. So right after you, Charlotte, let me just hear a little bit from everyone that is on the floor, everyone that is on the platform. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. I'll just wrap up now. So I'm just kind of in concluding, I would just say that let us, bring back that momentum of 1976 young youth, the likes of Steve Biko and all those people. Let's invoke the Constitution, because we do have that honor and dignity to do that. And things like solutions like circular economy could be one of radical solutions to gender-based violence as well. That's if men are willing to be humans.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. I hear you. I hear where you are coming from. And I can say that as a person, I have experienced much of the injustices. And like you said, excuse your French, excuse your language, but I'll just have to emphasize what Sibulele had said, that the legislature, the law, the communities, the society, and everyone is just throwing a middle finger at gender-based violence victims, and they're just spitting saliva on our faces. Kazamula, are you still here? What are your thoughts on the topic? What are your thoughts on the dialogue? What do you think we can do to flatten the curve of gender-based violence in our country? Innocent, are you here?
Thanks, Lindo. I'm still here. I think from my side, I can come from the law perspective as to what exactly can it be done to flatten the curve of this pandemic. First of all, we need to strengthen the implementation side of the law. I remember I once written an assignment on the topic, and one of the recommendations that I made is that, let's say somebody is charged with such cases, Then the aspect of bail, it has to be, removed. Such person should not be granted bail whatsoever. Um, they have to stand trial until their innocence or guilt is proven. And then another thing which has to be, introduced, it's, the aspect of death sentence. Because honestly speaking, we cannot say we're sending these people to prison and then the purpose of prison is to reintegrate the same people into the society. But then the same people, when they are integrated back into the society, they still, commit the same act. So the reintroduction of death sentence, I think it would do some sort of justice in terms of, combating gender-based violence. However, as much as it has its disadvantages, it also has its advantages. For example, let's talk about the issue of, wherein there is false accusation. Now, to deal with this, I mean, there has to be intensive research um, in terms of ensuring that there's a watertight case. And then we also have to train our police officials, because um, if our police officials are not trained as to how to deal with such cases, then we're going nowhere as a country. So to ensure that such aspects are combated, we need to train our officers to deal with such cases, and also to do away with the mentality that, you know, uh, gender-based violence cases are the same as crime cases and all that. Because I think in our law system, that's exactly the problem. Gender-based violence cases are treated the same as crime cases, which if we still have that mentality, then we're going nowhere. I think let me not speak
Thank you so much.
much. Uh,
Thank you so much, Innocent. I hear you. I hear where you are coming from. The life sentence and so forth. It's just that we are being time constrained, and I would like to hear from everyone. And I hear that you're coming from the law perspective side of things. You are coming from airtight cases. You are ensuring that the law is harsher and stronger on perpetrators of gender-based violence. And I agree with you fully. But whilst we are still on the time lap, can I please quickly hear from Zach Ricotso? Zach, are you here? What are your thoughts on the topic? What do you think we should do to ensure that gender-based violence in our societies is actually flattened? What do you think the problem really is? Just briefly tell us what your thoughts are. Zach, are you here? If Zach is not here and he's quiet, can we hear from Abigail? Abigail, we are still on the topic of sexual gender-based violence. We're talking about the law, we're talking mental health, we're talking redistributing the funds towards gender-based violence. We're talking about legislature and policy. What are your thoughts so far on the topic? What do you think we should do to flatten the curve for gender-based violence in our country? Abigail?
Hello. Sorry. Yes, my name is Abigail. I'm actually not from South Africa. I'm actually from the Virgin Islands. I saw this event on Eventbrite online, and it was a virtual event. So I'm actually very glad that I attended, because I wasn't sure. I thought it was a event about Africa, but I wasn't sure what the exact topic was. And I'm so glad I attended, because although I'm interested in connecting with persons from Africa, I am also a victim of gender-based violence, and I just happened to join because I just have an interest in attending African events, and I wanted to do so virtually. And I just thought it was just a sign. Like, I don't believe in coincidences anymore. And I just recently had a son. He's 3 years old, and I'm not involved in any policy in any kind of way. I'm just someone who's interested in staying involved, and I try to stay involved for his life because gender-based violence has affected my life, but it's also affected my son's life because when I walked in recently pregnant, I did have assistance. I spoke to a gender-based violence organization, and they helped me through my pregnancy very early on when his father started showing signs of wanting to hurt me. So I was able to be, I was actually rescued. Let me just say that I was actually rescued.
Zamula was saying that indeed there needs to be more training. Just so we can be more time conscious, can we hear from Ashley if she's still here? Ashley, what are your thoughts on the conversation? What would you like to say about the conversation, and what do you propose as a solution to flatten the curve of gender-based violence or sexual gender-based violence in Africa? Ashley, are you here with us?
Yes, I am. I do think that gender-based violence is a really serious issue, and there does need to be like a lot more done, and a lot more awareness needs to be brought to the issue. And I think that tips for like youth in particular to prevent gender-based violence would be like educating yourself on the like root causes of violence, interrupting sexist and discriminatory language like when you see it, being critical and questioning like any issues that you're aware of, and stopping sexual harassment by like finding help if you know that like someone that's going through it. It could be like a close friend or a family member, and also stop victim blaming.
Ashley, are you still here, or is it just my network? I can't hear anything anymore.
Yeah, I said like my thoughts.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much about.
Yeah,
Oh,
you're welcome.
okay. Sorry about that. I thought that I couldn't hear you anymore. We do have a time constraint, and a lot of people do talk about African time, that Africans do not show up on time, but they show up for the event. So I do like, by all means, that we do keep to time, but I want to hear from everyone. I want us all to engage as much as possible, to learn from each other, and just to also not learn, but to also create a support community for ourselves. We might not know each other, we may never met, but I do believe that we do all share similar stories. We do share similar proposals, and we do share, a similar idea of what we could do as far as gender-based violence is concerned. Just to wrap up the session, I would like to hear from our speakers at least one more time, so that they can conclude. They can conclude their ideas. They can conclude their speeches. I am going to start with Sibulele. Sibulele, please do wrap up your time. Tell us what you think about the conversation. You can expand more on the root causes. You can expand more on the patriarchy. Just let us know more of what is on your mind. What do you think of the conversation? What do you think about what other people have said so far? Sibulele, I hope you're still on the platform, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lindo. I'm still on. The conversation is moving towards a very progressive direction. First things first, for us to be able to acknowledge that there's a problem and then further go to the cause of the problem, and then people also relate to all these issues, that alone is enough, right? So it's enough for us to come back, sit into the table, and come with proposed practical solutions so that we can be able to create policies where not only just going to be talking about policy implementation, but also we will be attaching the practical policy implementation on the other side. So yes, indeed, I'm very much well aware of what has been discussed, and that's why I'm getting now. It's a very much progressive conversation to begin with, right? Because people have agreed that indeed on a status quo, what is happening is not enough. We're just having these policies. But also me, as I conclude, Lindo, and as I land and I submarine, one, I want to raise three things very, very shortly within this 1 minute. Firstly, I believe in visible representation. Visible representation in the sense that members of the marginalized and minority groups must take up space in corporate, take up space in law, take up space in legislatures, take up space in government, parliament, take up space so that we can be able to make decisions that are not only informed on papers by advices, but also are informed by our own personal perspective based on our own experiences, so that we can be able to relate to them. So members of the marginalized and minority groups must, with immediate effect, take up space. This includes women, includes members of the LGBTIQ. It includes members of the disability community, and perhaps maybe also it does include members who are victims of the gender-based violence, also sexual-based violence. We need to take up space. And as I close, I want to say that it's either you invite yourself into the table or you are invited into the table. If you are not invited into the table, go to the table and grab a chair and sit. Don't wait upon a request or maybe an invite, because no one is going to invite you. Patriarchy does not work like that. Patriarchy works on the basis of who's much more privileged to get what, right? And in this instance, LGBTIQ people living with disabilities, members of women are not favored by patriarchy. So Mnanditi, let us go and invite ourselves to the table, grab the chair, don't ask for consent, and do everything that is on the table. If it's food, make sure that you mention as possible. If it's discussions, make sure that you converse as possible. If it's solutions, make sure that you implement practical and propose practical implementation solutions. It's about time that women, LGBTIQ people, and victims take up space, and they should not be mum about it. They should not be apologetic about it. They should not even entertain any sense of trying to be tamed down. It's about time we call ourselves to bulldoze. Milandi, if you're not invited, invite yourself into the table and make sure that you implement an affirmation action. Thank you so much, Lindo. And thanks very much to everyone. And thanks to Ndi and also for hosting me and having me today. I wish all of you guys the best, and please do enjoy. If you're in South Africa, you're June 16 and elsewhere, please make sure that you do have a great afternoon and a possible great evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sibulele. We are also so delighted to have had you here. You have raised so many insightful points, and of course, like I said, that we are obliged to have a community, a network of women that is more like a safe space where we can always engage with each other, talk, and come up with all of these proposed situations. And I am very big on engagement, and I do believe that talking does make a difference. And I would just like to emphasize and agree with you so much that patriarchy does not invite the marginalized to the table. It's only a matter of privilege, and if you do not have that privilege, you should not be apologetic about inviting yourself to that table, taking a chair, and sitting right there without consent and engaging as much as you can, because then if you're unapologetic, it's the only time that your voice can actually be heard and your ideas can actually rise above that which is happening so far. Charlotte, are you still on the platform? Please do conclude for us. What are your concluding thoughts? What are your closing statements? What do you think of the conversation so far? And what are your last thoughts on the conversation? Charlotte, the platform is yours.
Thank you, Linda Kushe. And thank you, Sibulele. That was like really amazing and great. The conversation was, really, it was like close to home. So it kind of like, I just want to say to all of you guys, read. If there's anything that is we are really disadvantaged with as an African descendant community, is everything we need to know is in the books, and all those pages, the policies they are making, they are affecting our lives. For example, like I mentioned, the climate change bill, let's follow the policies that are being made and drafted in our countries and in our local municipalities. Like Sibulele said, bring your seat to the table. Don't wait to be invited. These people, they don't see us as, the marginalized. They don't hear us, and we need to bring ourselves to these spaces to be seen and to be heard, for them to look at us as people and as part of the society as well. So do what you must, to influence what you want. So don't hold back.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. And I do want to say that there is no point in holding back, because when you do hold back, that is actually the moment when you close yourself up to so many thoughts, to so many emotions, that you cannot even be able to vent to the other person. So we shouldn't be holding back, but we should have platforms and forums just like this one, where we can be able to support each other. So just to wrap up the session, I would just like to extend my most surmountable, humble gratitude to everyone that showed up and to everyone that shared their stories. Abigail, I am so touched by your story. I would like for us to engage more. I would like for us to get to know each other more, because indeed here we were disturbed by time constraints. If it's possible, could everyone just leave their email addresses on the chat box? I will start mine, and then we can be able to take the conversation further. I would like to extend my most surmountable, humble appreciation and gratitude to Ndi Imanaye, the founder of Youth Evolve, for making this happen. And she is really the one that pushed and make sure that we get to have a platform like this, where all of us have met up and are unified and are talking about this. And most of the time, I do say that such platforms are not platforms just for us to, just to talk and to propose solutions, but to some extent, they are a platform where we can get to heal and understand even more some of the things that have happened to us, because you can be a victim of gender-based violence and still not understand what gender-based violence is and how it actually had happened to you. So we learn all the time, and I am reiterating and emphasizing what Charlotte just said right now, that it is very important to read and consult. The Imanaye, our very beautiful host, our most humble host. I am taking back the reins of the platform back to you. Thank you so much for making this happen for us. I am saying once again, please, let's do keep in touch even after this, and because we do have so much more of these conversations that are lined up. Ndi, the platform is yours. Thank you so much. I am looking forward to engaging with everyone further. Thank you.